Java to JavaScript lesson number 6. RequireJS and jQuery UI. In this tutorial, we are going to talk about how to install RequireJS into our application. As we have discussed, every single application must go through 3 different phases: load, configure, and run. So after we install RequireJS into our application, we need to load the RequireJS library. After that, we need to configure the RequireJS library, and then we'll be loading jQuery library with RequireJS since RequireJS is running at this point. And then we'll load the jQuery UI with RequireJS after jQuery is completely loaded. And after jQuery UI is loaded, we can start up the application and test a jQuery UI component as in the previous tutorial. In this particular case, we are going to use the same slider. Let's get into the code. After all the preparations of setting up the web application as well as the jQuery UI, finally we can start the RequireJS migration. As usual, let's start the application. So npm run dev to start up the application. So everything is working right now. The slider is working. The drop down button is working. What happened if we swap the order of loading jQuery.js and jQueryUI.js libraries? Let's try that. Swap the order. So right now we are loading the jQuery UI first, and then we load the jQuery.js. Let's save it. So you see that the slider immediately went away once we swapped the order. So jQuery UI is not working. It can only be loaded after jQueryJS library. Let's put it back. Save it. And now it is back. All right. Before we configure the RequireJS, let's put some horizontal divider between each rows. So let's put it here. And here. And here. All right, let's save it. So now we see the horizontal divider right here. 1, 2. There should be one more. Yeah. 1, 2, 3. So they divide all 4 rows. In order to migrate to RequireJS, we need to go through the same several steps, which is install, load, configure, and run. So let's install RequireJS. So npm install --save RequireJS. Finally, it is time to configure RequireJS for our application. So before we do that, let's comment out all the libraries, all the JavaScript libraries from here. So it shouldn't work right now. All right, so the slider has went away and the drop down button doesn't work. Okay. So instead of loading all these libraries, all we need to load is the RequireJS library. So let's load that. And it would be in /node modules. Let's take a look at where exactly it is. RequireJS. Okay, so RequireJS and require.js /require main.js. Alright. Now that we load RequireJS, we need to configure it. So let's set up the configuration. Let's specify the configuration file. Data main. Save it. So right now, it points to the main.js file. The reason why we don't need to specify the .js extension is because data main must point to a JavaScript file. And the assumption is it has an extension .js. So that's why, as you can see from the server, it is loading the main.js right here. Let's see what happened to the browser as well. So let's reload that. Reload the application. So now we know that we are loading the RequireJS first, and then browsing, and then we are loading the main.js. Okay, notice that the main.js is in the same directory as the index.html. So back to the editor. Let's look for the main.js. So this is the index.html, and the main.js is in the same directory as the index.html. Open that. Inside main.js, we have the configuration phase and the running phase. The configuration phase is signified by RequireJS, or you can use require.configure. Inside the configure, we provide a JSON. Right now, it consists of path and shims. There are more attributes or more keys that we could add in order to configure RequireJS, but for now, we just need these two. So the next thing is, we are going to move over the JavaScript files from the index.html to main.js. So let's do that. Copy, and then paste it in the file here. Of course, we need to comment them out because this is a JavaScript file. So let's comment it out. Alright. Still not working. This is what it's supposed to be. Let's work with the slider for now. In order for the slider to work, we need to load jQuery.js and jQueryUI.js properly. Let's add that. jQuery. And we need to put in the paths, so we can copy this part. And paste it here. Notice that we don't need to put in the .js extension because RequireJS can only handle JavaScript. So all the files that is in the paths are defaulted with JS extension. Okay, so the next one is the jQueryUI. All right. Let's copy it from here. All right. So we have already put in the two libraries. Let's see whether it will work or not. Let's save it. Okay, we still don't have jQuery and jQueryUI being loaded right now. Because we have loaded RequireJS, we have loaded main.js as signified in here, but we haven't loaded these two libraries. Okay? In order to load libraries, we need to set some kind of dependency in RequireJS. In RequireJS, require function in here is in fact the main function that is like in Java. So in Java, there must be a class that has a main function, a public static final main function that start up an Java application. And this is the equivalent of that in RequireJS. So in here, all we need to specify is we need jQuery and jQueryUI so that we can start up our application. So let's put in jQuery and see whether it will work or not. Let's save it. So now, in addition to require and main.js, we have jQuery.js. But we still don't have jQueryUI.js. So let's put it there. Comma, because this is an array, jQueryUI. Let's save it. Okay, so we have require.js, we have the main, we have jQueryUI and jQuery.js, but it still doesn't work here. What happened? In addition to that, we need to specify the ID slider is a slider using jQueryUI. Let's take this JavaScript code, put it in here. You know, we start up our application in the main function as in Java, or in the RequireJS running function, we would like to start it up with the slider, targeting the slider ID. Let's save this and see. All right, so the slider is back here. So it actually works. But wait a minute, we know that we need to have jQuery being low first before jQueryUI in order to work. So let's take a look at how it is being loaded. So right now we have the correct order, jQuery and then jQueryUI. But we haven't put in any dependencies such that we kind of enforce jQuery low first before jQueryUI. So maybe it's because of the array. So let's how about if we remove the jQuery and let's see what will happen. Save it. The slider still works. And right now we see that jQueryUI load first before jQuery. What happened? And how come it still works? Didn't we see that? If we use the script tag, if we swap the order of jQuery and jQueryUI, the slider won't work. But how come it works right now? Well, the secret is inside jQueryUI library. So let's take a look at the jQueryUI library. Let's take a look at the source code. Go to Node Modules. Go to jQueryUI bundle. That's what we use. Right, this bundle right here. And we are loading jQueryUI.js. Let's double click that. At the beginning of the jQueryUI library source code, we see that there is an immediately invoked function expression. So the very first thing is it checks to see whether defined is a function and defined AMD exists or not. Since we are using RequireJS, defined function must be defined, and the defined AMD exists. It will execute instruction that is inside this if statement here. Or else we'll pass in the jQuery library to the factory. Alright? Since we are using RequireJS, so this is defined and we will execute this part of the code. And inside this part of the code, we actually defined jQuery as a dependency. And after we load the jQuery library as a dependency, we'll start up the factory for jQueryUI. Notice that we use the name jQuery in all lowercase. That actually matches our jQuery right here. So that's why even though if jQueryUI is loaded beforehand and then we load the jQuery, in effect, we load jQuery first and then we load the rest of the jQueryUI after. So let's prove that. Since our application is working, let's make it not work. The key is jQueryUI library has a hard-coded kind of like macro or name with jQuery all lowercase. So if we change our paths to say jQuery underscore, we'd add an underscore right there. Let's save it. See, the slider went away. That means jQueryUI is utilizing that jQuery macro or path to load the jQuery.js library first. So how can we make it work again? We can of course remove the underscore right here, or let's do it properly. So in the shims, what we can do is we specify the dependencies of jQuery-UI. So jQuery-UI depends on, it is an array because we could have multiple dependencies, jQuery underscore. By doing this, what we are saying here is when we load jQueryUI, we need to load jQuery underscore first, which is the jQuery.js library. Let's save it. So after we did that, jQueryUI's slider returns and it works. So that is the way to set up the dependencies within RequireJS. So the way it works is, let's go back to index.html. We load the RequireJS library and we configure the RequireJS library using main.js. In the main.js, we configure the RequireJS library by specifying the paths of the libraries that we need to load. Since RequireJS is a JavaScript library loader, it loads all JavaScripts. After that, we start up the application by specifying all the immediate dependency for the running function, kind of like the main function. So you can think about these dependency kind of like the inputs that is on top of the class with the main function in Java. In Java, we have to import all those classes before we start up the main function. Same thing goes here. So we specify the dependencies before we run the main function or the startup function for the RequireJS. From here, we look up the RequireJS library. Oh, we need a jQueryUI library. So let's load that. When we load that, we realize that, oh, the jQueryUI needs jQuery library. So it loads the jQuery library first, and then the jQueryUI. And if we take a look at the order of the loading right now, it is always jQuery first before jQueryUI. That is because this is working. That means before we load the jQueryUI, we need to load the jQuery library first. Okay, so if we comment this out, it won't work. Alright, because you cannot find the jQuery.js library. And this requirement or the dependency is actually built into the jQueryUI right here. Alright, so we comment it out. We take out this underscore. And now we load the jQuery UI first before the jQuery because of the jQuery UI inside actually specified jQuery as the dependencies. So that's how it works. If we remove this dependency and change the jQuery underscore to jQuery. Alright. So next week we are going to set up the proper.js and bootstrap main so that our drop down button will work again. Right now, it doesn't work. Thank you and see you next time.